Hi guys, in today's video I want to show you the only brushes that you need as a beginner. So we are starting off with eyebrows. So this is a two-in-one brush. As you can see, on this side it is an angled brush and on the other side it is a spoolie. We have obviously, you know, the ones that come separately as a spoolie and separately as a brush, but I really love this brush. This specific one is the Eyebrow eyelash and eyebrow brush. So I'm taking a little bit of my soap and then just applying it all over my eyebrows and then filling in. The next brush that you need as a beginner is this one. This one is for cleaning up your eyebrows. This one is a concealer brush from Mira Cosmetics. It's their flat definer brush. Another alternative, if you prefer a shape that looks like this, that is more round domed, this one is the Eman Beauty Co concealer brush. So either one of them can be really beautiful with cleaning your eyebrows. I personally prefer this just because of the sharp angle. And I'm taking some of my foundation and then just cleaning the front part of my eyebrow, and then later on go on with cleaning the concealer. And you can see how the shape of your brush really determines if your cleaning will be simple or if it will be hard. Because this already has that flat top, I just have such an easy time cleaning, and I like to use also the side to just smoothen it out so that you don't have too much product on one end and little on the other end. Okay, so I have finished cleaning up my eyebrow top and bottom. I did go in with a lighter concealer over here. That's why it looks a little bit differently. And then now for the cleaning up or the blending of the concealer, I like to go in either with a brush that looks like this, something that is dense and a bit flat-ended at the top so I can be able to get in close to the eyebrow, or alternatively I go in with my sponge. But if you're going in with your sponge, which is what I prefer to do, because sponges automatically absorb some of your product, what I like to do is I take my sponge that is clean and then add a little bit of whatever it is that I've used, either my concealer or my foundation, just so my beauty blender can have a little bit of product, so that when I come in and blend it out, it doesn't pick away most of the product because it already has product on top of it. I hope that makes sense. So I'm just going in and blending that out. And you can either use tapping in motion, which allows the product to stay in place, so it gives you a more full coverage look, or if you want like a very natural, very sheer coverage, then obviously you drag it back and forth and that moves the product around so it distributes it, so you don't have too much product on one area. Next, we're going on to our eyeshadow, and starting off we're doing with our eyeshadow primer. And for that, because I like to use a very thick consistency eyeshadow base that is very thick. This one is the Benai Clown White. As you can see, it's very thick. So for that, I like to go in with a brush that is a bit dense like this, or alternatively you can always go back in with your beauty blender. I think it's important for me to note that even though I am trying to show you that you don't need a lot of brushes, I'm trying to give you options so that if for example you have this brush in your kit, you don't say, okay, so she didn't mention this one in the video, so obviously I don't have to use it. No, with the brushes that you can use, because this one can also double up as a brush for blending out your concealer or even for applying matte product. So I'm gonna go in with this and then just apply a little bit of it onto my eyelid. And the reason I like to use a very thick brush is because it allows me to be able to blend out this product, because it's quite thick, in an easier way, as opposed to a brush that looks like this, which would be suitable for more shadow based products. So that's your matte eyeshadow or even your powder. So I'm just going to blend that in and then go on to our eyeshadow. So my base is already blended out. Now I want to mention that if you are looking to be a makeup artist, then you definitely need a lot more of these brushes. But if you are a beginner and you're just doing it for your personal makeup, then obviously you don't need so many. So for eyeshadow, I like to use a variety of brushes, anyone that looks like this, just anything that is nice and fluffy for application of our matte shadows. And then if I were to go in with a shimmer shade, I would like to go in with a brush that looks like this. It's also fluffy, but it's a bit flat on both sides, and then it enables me to be able to pick up the shimmer, because shimmer usually has a lot of pigment, so it enables me to pick it up and to be able to glide it onto my eye easily. So for today, I'm going to be doing a very simple look. It's going to be a monochrome pink look, and for that I'm going to be using this brush. It's a fluffy brush, just a normal fluffy brush. This one is for Liabella. It's the Liabella crease brush. And then for eyeshadow, I'm going to be using this pink shade from the Fabulosity palette by NK Cosmetics, and then just smothering that color all over my lid. And I'm not actually going to use any other brush. That was the only brush that I'm going to use for this whole look, because it's just one color. Obviously, if you're going in with looks that require a lot more brushes, you can either choose to do two things. So use your brush, and then just every time you want to use it for something different, wipe it off with a tissue and then pick up that product. Or alternatively, you can just close your eyes and invest in a couple of brushes, so you can be able to have a lot more variety when it comes to your brushes for application. Okay, so I am done with the application of my eyeshadow. If you notice, I only patted it in because I really wanted the pigment to show, so I didn't want to move it around. So if you can notice, the edges of my eyeshadow is not blended, and I want to show you how with just one single brush you can be able to still blend out that edge. You don't need another brush. So what I'm going to do, as you can see, this is a brush that I use, so I'm just going to tap away any excess, and then now use anything that is left to just blend it in. The reason why is because I don't want to add a different color, whether a brown or a yellow. I just want to maintain that same color but still have it blended out and look well diffused. So I'm just going to take it, and then again I'll start blending in with that. So eyes are done. We're moving on to the face. I've already moisturized, prepped, and primed my face. So we're moving on to foundation. Usually with my base products, that's my moisturizer, serums, etc., I always like to use my hands. I do know that there are some clients who don't like using their hands, especially like if you're doing it on somebody, but for that one I like to use something that looks like this. This one is also a brush from, I think, a company called Fabulous. I've had it for years now. It looks like this. It is a synthetic brush, and it is flat ended on both sides, so it's easy to be able to glide on your moisturizer, your serum, your SPF, etc. But now, because I use my hands, we're moving on to foundation. So for foundation, I like to use either these two. And I think it's important to note that because there are people who don't like using beauty blenders at all, obviously you can substitute the places where I'm using a beauty blender with a brush of that similar nature. But for my foundation, I like to either go in with this one. This one is a flat topped brush. It's also dense. It can also substitute as a powder brush, especially if you want that full coverage, like flawless beat kind of face, because it picks up the product in an even way. That's the powder, and then it applies it and hides any blemishes. But it can also substitute as a foundation brush, or alternatively I like to use this one. This one is actually my favorite. It's a domed brush that looks like this. It's beautiful for application, and you can either swipe the product or pat it in. But for this specific one, because of how it's been formulated, I like to use it when to pat it in, especially if I want that full coverage look. And then obviously there's the other alternative of a beauty blender or a sponge. This one gives, I feel like, in my opinion, a more natural and a more flawless base. And even when I'm going in with my brushes, I always afterwards go in with my beauty blender, because there are some brushes that do leave brush streaks, and this one just smoothens everything out. It is important to note that when you're using a beauty blender, make sure it's damp. Make sure it's not dry, it's not wet like dripping, it's just damp. So that means running it through water and then squeezing out the excess, and then taking a towel or a paper towel, and then just squeezing out the excess. So I'm gonna go in with my foundation, and I'm gonna show you on both sides. They said I'm gonna use this domed brush, and then on the other side I'm gonna use a sponge, so that you can just see the difference of how the two look like. Okay, so before I finish blending, I want to just show you guys how it looks like. This side we've used a brush and this side we've used a beauty blender. If you can notice, this side, the one with a beauty blender, looks a lot more natural, a lot more skin-like as opposed to this side. But usually I go afterwards with the brush with a beauty blender just to smoothen it out. And then I don't know if the camera is showing, but even how smooth it is. If you compare this side to this side is more smooth than this side. I don't know, it's a personal it's a personal preference, and especially when I don't have a lot of time to work, I usually use a brush first because it's easy to distribute the product nicely and then even it out with my beauty blender. But for those days when I have a lot more time, I always just go in straight with my beauty blender because now I am able to get like into those cracks and crevices, because for a brush, areas like around the nose or sometimes over here, depending on how big your nose is, no shade, like I'm just saying, like depending on like how your nose looks, because there are people who have like more of and like your nose is, this part is going in, you know what I mean. So depending on that, sometimes a brush might not be able to get into those spaces, but with a sponge you're able to now with the sharp part just get into those areas and then just be able to blend it easily. So it's all preference, so you can either use a brush or a sponge. Okay, so everything has been blended out. A tip for you guys, always make sure when you're using your beauty blender, and it's something that I've noticed with a lot of my students, like you really like literally like beat the face. Like, no, you have to remember that the more pressure that you're putting on your beauty blender, the more you're sucking out the product. So if you want the layer to be nice and even and not patchy even with your beauty blender, make sure you use a very light hand. It's just almost like you're, you know, placing it on top and just place lift. So the lighter your motion, the better your effect will be. Also, when you're looking for a beauty blender, look for something that is, you know, more flexible as opposed to like the really hard beauty blenders. Those ones are really not good when it comes to blending out your cream products. So look for something fluffy, something, you know, just bouncy. It will give you a really beautiful effect. We're moving on to cream contour. Obviously, this is not a must. You can always go back in with your powder contour as opposed to this one. But if you do prefer using a cream contour, usually I would do like this, and then blend it out. But I realize that it gives you a more beautiful and a more natural effect when you just take it, apply a little bit of it on the back of your hand, and then just use. I am using the exact same brush that I used for my foundation, although you can use a different one. But I do like that product because it helps to blend in that area between the foundation and the contour, so it just looks nice and seamless and mwah, chef's kiss. So I'm using just the edge of this. I'm not applying with my whole brush, and that's also something that I want you guys to remember. You have to be very intentional with even how you use your tools. If, for example, you're using a brush that looks like this, do you want to use the whole of it, or do you just want to use the side of it so that you can use the rest of it to blend? I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope it does. But you have to really be intentional with even your tools, because that will really determine how good your makeup turns out. So I'm just using the edge of it, and then now the rest of it that has the foundation will help be able to melt and to blend it in to the rest of my face. So here we go, just picking up some of that product. And then usually if you want to know where your contour is supposed to be, if you look the top part of your ear and then just draw an imaginary line, then there is where your contour is supposed to be. So I'm just going to place it over here, and then you don't want to ever drag your contour all the way till here. It will give your face an unnatural illusion, and naturally when you look at somebody, the shadows are usually like very nice and natural. So you want to replicate that and not overdo it in a way that looks unnatural and fake, you know what I mean? So I'm just going to apply it right over there. And if you notice, the motion that I'm using is pressing it and going upwards, because you want to go up in an upward motion as opposed to down, because that would make your face look a lot more like this, and you want the face to be lifted, to look more youthful, more vibrant. So that's why we're doing it in an upward motion. So I'm using the same brush and then just carving it out like so. And I'm going to drag it all the way to this area over here. If you notice, I didn't apply any product over here because I want to mimic this exact color. If you're able to mimic the exact color of the complexions of your face, because we usually have like different complexions. Like my face is usually a slightly different complexion from my neck, is slightly different from my chest, slightly different from my hands. So what you want to do is really play those tones and make sure that you're trying to almost replicate that color. So as you can see over here, I haven't applied the product, the foundation ended here. So I want to try and replicate this specific color so that I can bring out the natural shadow color. I hope that makes sense. So let me blend it out and you see how it looks. It doesn't look harsh or unnatural because it is the exact same color of that area. Okay, so we're moving on to our concealer. I've already applied it in those areas. If you want a detailed video on how to do that, then definitely let me know in the comment section. So for concealer, you can either use two things. You can either use a brush. For a brush, I like to use this one. This one is a Real Techniques brush. I'm not sure the name, but it looks like this. It's pretty small and very, very easy to work with, and the bristles are really, really soft. Also, guys, when you're looking to buy products, make sure you look for high quality products, because sometimes if you buy like those, you know, cheap ones, and the bristles are so hard and they're so tough to work with, and they're also really abrasive on your skin, and you end up getting like tears on your skin and things like that. So make sure you really get high quality products. So this one, or alternatively our trusty, our handy beauty blender. So again, I'm going to show you on both sides. Again, you don't have to buy both of them. I do have a lot of variety of this one because I am a makeup artist, but you can either choose to use either. But I'm going to show you how both look, and then you can be able to decide. So I'm going to start off with a beauty blender on this side. And then I always use the exact same place that I've used my foundation, because it does help to really melt that product into your foundation and give it that nice and blended effect. Next, we're moving on to setting our under eyes, and for that I just use my plain old beauty blender. But because this one has a lot of products, I'm going to go in with just a different sponge, but you can go in with the exact same beauty blender. It's all about preference. So I'm blending it out and then setting it with my powder. So I have finished setting my face. I like to, you know, leave a little bit of powder so I can just look like a rabbit. The next thing we're gonna do is our powder, our compact powder, and also our contour. For that, I usually use one brush. It looks like this. This one is the Liabella. I don't know the name of the brush, but because it's been wrapped off, but it's the Liabella brush. It's a really beautiful powder brush, and the bristles are so soft and very good to use on the skin, and also doesn't leave any like residue behind. So I'm gonna just use this one and then use my powder color, which is usually a mix of these two, and then apply it on my face. Alternatively, if you do want a more full coverage look, as I had explained earlier, then you can always go in and use a brush that looks like this. It's more compact and it's more dense, so it does pick up more product and apply it a lot more with full coverage as opposed to a brush like this. But because I usually like my powder to be, you know, nice and skin-like, I usually like to use a brush that is less dense like this. So I apply it like that, and you notice I'm not using like the tip like this. I am using the side of the brush. So even when I'm picking up, I'm very intentional to pick up on the side like this and then apply it on like that. So for contour, I would either go in with the very same brush but just use like the side of it, or alternatively I can go in with a brush that looks like this. It is angled and also from Liabella. It's a beautiful brush, and then it's also very nice and fluffy, so it enables you to be able to pick up your product easily and to be able to diffuse it. So I'm going to go in with this one, and then again, I'm not using the whole part of the brush. I'm just going to be using the tip and then using the rest of the brush to just diffuse that product. So picking it up like that. As you can see, that's the only part that has the product, and then I'm going to apply it in the very same way that we applied the cream contour. By the way, guys, you don't have to apply both the cream contour and the powder contour. I'm just showing you guys whichever you choose to use, you can be able to still manipulate it in a way that it gives you a really beautiful and natural effect. And then with the one that is remaining is what I blend onto my chin and into my neck. So for my nose contour, I like to use the very same brush that we use for our eyeshadow blending, just a very small one, and then just form those lines nicely on both sides and then go back in and blend it. This is also optional, and if you are able to just take this and then just press it in, you can always also be able to use that to blend in your nose contour. So we are done with that. So for blush, which is the next step, you can either decide to again go in with your brush. What I just like to do if I've used it for powder, then now I want to use it for contour, I just wipe it on a dry tissue, guys, a dry tissue, not a wet tissue or a wet wipe. So a dry tissue, and then now you can be able to use the same brush for different things. But if you have a brush that looks like this one, I got it as part of a PR package. It's from Bella Beauty, and it's just nice and fluffy. But anything even from something like this can be able to work. What you're looking for when it comes to a brush for your blush, a brush for your blush, is just something fluffy, something not dense, and something that you'll be able to spread the product in easily. So this is a blush palette that we're going to use. I don't want a very harsh blush, so I'm going to be mixing this one and this one together. And again, I'm very intentional. I'm not using the whole part of the brush. I'm just using the tip of the brush like so, and then just tapping away the excess. That's all that it has. And this blush is very, very pigmented, so I don't want to go in with too much. So just right above your contour is where we're going to come put our blush. And for an easier way to be able to know is when you just smile, like that little part that protrudes, that's where I usually feel like it looks nice on with blush. But it does also depend on your face shape, because I have more of a rounded face. Then I usually like to put it on those areas because it is more flattering to my face shape. But depending, if you have like an oval shape or a square shaped face, then definitely where you apply the blush would be different. If you do want me to do a video on that, then do let me know in the comment section. So I am just patting it in very, very lightly, and also where you hold the brush really matters. So if you want to work on an area that is quite specific, then you hold it a little bit closer. But if you're just blending out a general area and for a more diffuse look, then I do recommend going a little bit further out towards the handle. It will give you a beautiful and diffused look. So I'm just blending that out like this. Underneath my eyes, just to smoke it out, I am using the exact same brush that I used for my eyeshadow and the exact shadow color, because we are going in for a monochrome look. But because I don't want it to be like so diffused underneath my eye, like my eye equal all pink, I will just, you know, put it in a way that it just gives me a very nice and light layer of that pink. And lastly, guys, for highlight, I like to use the exact same shape of the brush as I used for my blush, just because I like that it's really light and fluffy and it's easy to blend. So I'm gonna pick just a little bit of it. Nowadays, highlight is not really as popular, so most of the time I usually skip this, especially in those times when I have a makeup client who doesn't really like, you know, that bit of definition. But for those who do, I would use a brush that looks like this. Obviously, just clean out the blush that we had used previously, and then just blend it out. If you want to know, it's usually like the contour and then marrying into the blush and then marrying into the highlight. And I'm going to apply just a very light layer of that, and then obviously use a slightly smaller brush for my nose highlight, because you just want to highlight the tip and the top of the bridge, just like that. So that brings us to the end of the video. I went off camera and I did the rest of my face, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching and learning a thing or five about which brushes are the best to use as a beginner. It's not really complicated, and it's not like rocket science. You just look at what you have and see how you can be able to use it, because different brushes can be able to substitute for different things and not just the things that I have taught you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content.